Welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, and today I'll be talking about the Eight of Wands. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. The best way to support the podcast right now is to listen daily, rate, review, and to follow or subscribe in your chosen podcast app. If you're loving the podcast and want to further support me, you can join my Patreon for behind-the-scenes access to upcoming topics, polls, monthly hangouts, and more. If you're local to the greater Puget Sound area, I'd love to see you at my next Let's Talk Tarot meetup group event. Join me in person on Monday, April 14th from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Sumner Library to create your own tarot cards. No experience is necessary. I'll bring all the supplies and we'll talk tarot and craft together. If you don't already know, I'm a sex and relationships therapist seeing clients virtually all over Washington state. I love working with queer, kinky, poly, and witchy clients who might be struggling with anxiety, chronic pain and illness, communication issues, self-advocacy, and sex. Book a free 20-minute consultation now to make sure we're a good fit to work together. And if you're interested in my free PDF with the 2025 5-card tarot spread I created just for you at the beginning of this year, you can get that by joining my newsletter list. My weekly newsletter always has the most up-to-date information on my upcoming events, presentations, musings, and info and photos of my day-to-day life. You can find the links for any of these offers in the show notes or on my website, CamilleASaunders.com/everydaytarot, in addition to the images of the cards that I pull. All right, so we are in season 6 now, where I'm talking all about the Suit of Wands, going through each card, one per episode. If you haven't listened to the other seasons yet, go ahead and check those out. The first season, I discussed tarot basics. In seasons 2 and 3, I went through the major arcana and the 4 suits. In season 4, I talked all about tarot and pop culture. And in season 5, I went through 13 common tarot spreads. Like I said, we're in season 6 now, where I'm talking all about the Suit of Wands. If you want to hear an episode dedicated to an overview of the Suit of Wands, you can check out season 3, episode 10. And today, we're specifically talking about the 8 of Wands. Okay, so images and symbols associated with this card are sort of fast-moving, action, energy. In the typical Rider-Waite-Smith depiction of the card, there are 8 wands or like sticks that are coming out of like the left side of the card, and they almost take up like the whole view of the card. Like they're very like with the depth wise, like they're in forward facing. We sort of have like a landscape in the background, and this is sort of representing that movement or progress or momentum. So things are moving quickly. So some of the decks I'm going to be sharing today are the Lila and Olive Ophidia Rosa Tarot, the Goddess of Love Tarot by Gabriela Herstick and Julia Popescu, and the Anima Mundi Tarot by Megan Weiwer-Wendon. So in the Ophidia Rosa Tarot, there is a beautiful image of like 3 flowers and some leaves, and then almost like 2 halves of a butterfly. If we think of butterflies, right, like they are quick moving, right? It's very often challenging to see them like standing still or to capture like a photo of them because they're flitting about. In this deck, there is a short description for each card. So I was going to see what they say in here. So we're under Wands and for 8, and it says, insist upon your own metamorphosis. Okay, so yeah, that's also about sort of transition, this sort of creative energy. And again, like thinking about like a literal metamorphosis of a butterfly, right? They sort of go from a worm or caterpillar into like a cocoon, and then all of a sudden one day they start sort of emerging out of that, and work on their wings and getting those out and drying off, and then they can fly away. So we're thinking about our own sort of metamorphosis when we think about this card. In the Goddess of Love Tarot deck, there are 8 roses that are all sort of crossing each other in like a, what would this be? I guess in a circle, but all of like the stems are pointed towards the middle and all the roses are to the outside. So it almost looks like a compass rose or something like that. It's a very like symmetrical looking image. Again, eights, right, can be evenly divided. And then there also is a beautiful landscape sort of in the background of mountains, of snow-covered mountains, and like we see some red mountains and perhaps some like flowers or landscape there. They talk about the Eight of Wands is all about pure potential that exists in a state of nothingness as much as it does in a state of kinetic chaos. This is one of the oldest expressions of the goddess. It's time to witness the energy of creation, expansion, and transformation at hand, no matter how overwhelming, and to direct and mold it accordingly. So again, we have this sort of transformation energy, right? We have this sort of perhaps being like a busy season of work or personal life, or right, again, as a gardener, I think about springtime where I am right now, like we're fluctuating between 60 or 70-degree days with sun and then also like cooler days with rain. And that mixture really promotes plant growth because you get the warmer temperatures, you get the sun, and then you also get heavy doses of rain, which are great for plants, maybe not so great for being outside in. But that is that idea of April showers bring May flowers. If you've heard this, that's because it's really nourishing to the plants. And if you had a drier season, the plants will grow slower often. Um, so we think of also aligning your will and desires with something greater than yourself. So again, this could be a project or spring cleaning or gardening, like other things that you've been working on that sort of, yeah, that we are going to sort of throw ourselves into, right? If we think about the energy of this card. And then the last deck I'm looking at is the Anima Mundi deck, like I talked about. And this one, for our Eight of Wands, it actually shows a roadrunner. A greater roadrunner, I guess, is specifically the name of the bird. And it says, after your past struggles, you're now free to move forward with your plans. But this time, things may be moving at a much faster pace than before. You may be entering a busy period now as you add new tasks and projects to your queue, but be sure not to rush into anything too quickly. So upright, it's all about speed, travel, swift action, and movement. And I'm definitely feeling this in my business right now. I got someone who is starting to help me out with creating the show notes and perhaps in the future some social media posts and things with the podcast. And they're really helping me sort of sort everything out, start delegating things. And I do feel like, right, I'm in this like, okay, like I got to start recording episodes and getting those batched so that they can work on them and listen to them and all this sort of stuff. It's really sort of forcing me to be organized and planning ahead. And also, right now, I'm sort of in that like, ooh, it feels a little uncomfortable because, right, I'm learning how to hand things off, and I'm also, learning that I need to be clear about certain things and sort of going back and forth with feedback, and then also still doing some of the same things I was doing before they start to take those over. So it is like this sort of crunch period of like, if you think about if you've ever been in a workplace where you were leaving or changing positions and someone was going to take over your job, where you're sort of in that training period where often it feels like, oh, okay, like I have to do all my normal work and then also I have to train someone and teach them how to do it, or right, that things sometimes can feel like they're moving slower or just like feeling that like, oh man, like I'm really, right, it's sort of making it very clear that I do need help, but also that right now it almost like things might feel a little bit harder before they get easier. And right, if we can kind of make it over that hump or that hill, then it's a little bit more of like smooth sailing. But like, right, we're in this roadrunner stage right now where we're running along, hoping for the best, right, trying to get things sort of in order. Which I love that idea of the roadrunner. And having been to Arizona before, I've seen roadrunners. They're very cool. They're quite small, but they're very quick, which is cool to see if you ever grew up watching cartoons with Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. So yeah, if we think about the specific card correspondence for the Eight of Wands, In the Library of Esoterica, tarot book by Toshin, they talk about it's all about swiftness and problem solving. The Eight of Wands asks us to take stock and take action. This card often encourages us to pause and review our options and rethink our priorities, right? So again, we're in this period of like, okay, things are moving quickly, right? I need to kind of assess and reflect and, right, maybe pause on some things or hand some things off or really start to sort of think about what is my priority and how do I actually do that. In the Fearless Tarot book by Elliot Adam, How to Give a Positive Reading in Any Situation, they talk about that the Eight of Wands is all about momentum. Events begin to move faster when this card appears. The Eight of Wands also rules information and communication. Answers to questions become available. Once stuck issues become unstuck, whether about a personal goal, an awaited answer, or a state of mind. Is it time for you to confront something in your life that feels stuck and get it moving again? Is it time to act on your personal goals? Are you procrastinating about something instead of just getting the job done? And the imagery of the Eight of Wands and the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot is the only card without a human or human part illustrated on it. Very interesting. There's an impersonal quality to the card. 8 sticks are hurtling through the air. What is that supposed to tell you? The lack of people symbolizes that progressing events should not be taken personally. It also advises you to move forward on what makes rational sense instead of letting anxiety stall you. Although all the wands are moving swiftly, they are not disorganized. There's a clear sense of direction, and if you have a card that sort of represents this, all of the wands are sort of fairly evenly spaced. Like they're not crossing each other. They're all sort of like coming out from the side of the card, all almost looking like arrows from a bow and arrow, like they're all flying straight. There also is often a river or a landscape at the bottom of the card, right, that can show that you need to move with life's currents instead of fighting against them. Sometimes they should depict a small house on the hill that can signify looking at things from a higher perspective. In the Goddess of Love tarot deck, there is sort of like mountains and hills in that landscape. And this is all about taking the rational view when confronting the issue. Make the logical choice. This card will also appear to tell you to just get the job done. Write the emails, finish the task, stop procrastinating. Do a Hail Mary and take that personal risk. Ask yourself, am I letting anxiety about something impede my progress on this issue? Do I need to speak up and confront something so that I can overcome it? And it says, don't be surprised if once stuck parts of your life begin to pick up speed. Summon your motivation and get it done. No excuses, no whining, and no more letting anxiety run the show. Avoidance results in depletion of personal power. Today, strength comes from confronting and acting. Let this fresh breeze at your back propel you forward. This is a very favorable card for getting events to finally move toward your target. Ride this momentum towards success. So I love that idea, right? That we're having these successes and now we're it's like, okay, get on board. Right? Go along. Now it's happening. All right. So in the Tarot and Astrology book by Corinne Kenner, they talk about that the Eight of Wands is associated with Mercury and Sagittarius. So this combines Mercury, who's known as the messenger, with Sagittarius, the sign of long-distance travel, philosophy, and higher education. Mercury was the messenger of the gods. He moved at the speed of light and thought, ferrying messages and communications across great distances in time and space. Like the magician, his tarot card counterpart, Mercury could transcend the limits and bonds of earthly existence and transform the physical world into a sphere of mental activity. Here in the Eight of Wands, he's traveling through the philosophical realm of high-minded Sagittarius, a sign that's happy to broadcast messages and communication to the world at large. It says, in fact, the 9th house of Sagittarius is the natural home of publishing. The card that corresponds to Sagittarius, Temperance, again, another major arcana card, symbolizes a bridge between two worlds, just as the written word bridges the divide between writers and readers. While wands usually convey a spiritual message, the 8 missives in the card also conform to the laws of physics. They fly in formation, like I was talking about earlier, almost looking like, yeah, in the same way that like geese fly in formation, or that like bows and arrows fly straight when you shoot them that way. And gravity will eventually compel them to land. At the moment, however, it's not clear whether the wands are taking off or arriving at their destination, or whether they'll reach their target or miss the mark. It's also not clear if anyone sees them overhead. Who sent them? Is anyone expecting their arrival? Since there are no people in the card, the wands may simply be carrying a message from the universe at large. So in a tarot reading, the Eight of Wands often symbolizes electronic communication, sailing across the airwaves, soaring through the stratosphere, bouncing off satellites, and crashing to a halt on your desktop or device in the palm of your hand. All right, so again, communication, messages, right? We have things flying through the air, soaring like the archer's arrows, which is also what's depicted in the Sagittarius zodiac sign. It's like a bow and arrow generally, and this connection of people and places to one another. And finally, in the Tarot for Change book by Jessica Dorr, using the cards for self-care, acceptance, and growth, she talks about that when she looks at the Eight of Wands, right, some people interpret this as swift movement. She says that this card always leaves me with more questions than answers. Where did the wands come from? Where are they going? What is this place? Where are all the people? What does a raw energy of swiftness mean when there's nothing else attached to it? Swiftly what? The wands symbolize the subtle stuff of life. Working well with this tacit requires a kind of tuning that is receptive to the less visible aspects of our experience, to the domains of our being that go beyond just the physical. The Eight of Wands, to me, asks questions about what falls within our personal field of energy and what falls beyond it. In more practical terms, this might mean determining what is inside your sphere of influence and what is not. Imagine you launch 8 wands into the air. Here's what is in your sphere of influence. How much force you use, how much training you did, what your posture was like, how your breath was, what you were standing on. But the rest, right, that's up to something else. How they land, where they land, what the wind looks like that day, how the land slopes, if a creature walks by and obstructs the trajectory, and so on. There are secrets in this card about willpower and allowing. So sometimes, right, there is this sense of, and actually I was talking about this with a client this morning, of that there are all these things that are outside of our control, and that can really like lend towards anxiety, right, or trying to control certain situations when we really don't have a lot of control in a lot of ways. We have control over ourselves, our own actions, right, some of the things we do, how we show up in relationship. But in a lot of other ways, right, we can't control other people. We often can't control, right, the wind, the weather, right, all these other factors, all these external pieces that are outside of our control. And then when we try to do that, right, this can lead to this level of anxiety or trying to prepare for all the different scenarios, which can really just lead us like spiraling down. And sometimes, right, if other people are bothering us, or we're trying to understand what's something triggered in ourselves, right, sometimes we have to look inward and see, right, like I have to allow other people to be the way they are, and how am I going to maybe show up or not show up in this relationship depending on my own ability and my own, right, desire or willingness to engage with a topic, or like levels of conversation. It says in here, it's a bit of a pity we can't see the state of the person who's launched the Eight of Wands, because I think that would tell us a lot too. What often makes the allowing part of life so challenging is that when reality doesn't line up with what we want, it's sometimes too painful or uncomfortable to bear. And so we exert will into the world, often on other people, as a way to avoid allowing the truth of what is and how we feel about it. the ground that you stand on when you decide to cross the aisle from this is my stuff to this is our stuff. Again, sort of when you're in relationships with people, it really matters here. When you're coming from a willful place of, I need you to do this, you need to stop doing that, right? We often invite suffering because in most cases we don't have that kind of control over other people. And when they don't do what we want, then we get really upset. So you can exert your will over other people until the cows come home. But if you haven't tended to your own stuff first, you'll perhaps wind up lobbing fireballs. And the fact is, people tend to be a lot less receptive when flaming ones come flying at them. So there is this sort of overall message of finding balance between our own willpower and allowing is much like the image on the card. There's no ground here. There's not much to hook into that you can take as an absolute reality or guideline. It will require a dogged presence. Just as this image shows 8 wands in motion, a photographic capture of a moment that will never look exactly the same again. No two situations will be the same either, but I think that if we make it a guideline to work on our allowing first, what's inside of us and what's inside the world around us, when we do exert will, we can do it with a stance of being grounded in what is, and that is a solid start. So again, they're sort of inviting us to think about, right, the levels of control we have in situations, right? We can set our own boundaries, we can remove ourselves from situations. We can tell people that, right, I'm not interested in having that conversation if you're going to use that tone of voice. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to handle that. But often when I, as a therapist, talk to people about boundaries, it can be very challenging to remove that part of us that really wants other people to behave differently. And really, if they just did that differently, or if they could just follow my instructions, or if they just did it the right way. And so there is often this level of like, okay, well, how do we accept how other people are? And perhaps that they might never change this aspect of themselves, or they might always be messier than I am, or they might always be late, or they might always be right there. There's some things about people and just their own stuff that then we have to figure out, okay, how am I going to regulate myself when things don't go the way I want? How am I going to communicate to other people my own boundaries? And again, how I plan to show up in situations, or how I plan to communicate with them about things when I am feeling hurt or resentful. And then there's a lot of other things outside of that that we have to allow, or we have to, I guess we don't have to, but that would be sort of what I think this card is offering us. That we don't necessarily always know the context, or we don't necessarily always know what these 8 wands are coming from or going to. And sometimes there are aspects of life where it's like, okay, are we going to get on board and deal with the thing once we arrive? Or, right, are we going to sort of stew in it and sort of want to force our own will, or have like anxiety fueled decisions that might ultimately not lead to what we want in the end? So let's dive in and see what the cards have to say today on this topic. And I'm going to pull from, I think I'm going to pull from the Therapist Who Tarot deck by prompts by Drea Bloom and images by Rebecca Bloom. I'm feeling called to pull from this because it is a deck created by therapists, some therapists who tarot, and yeah, I'm just sort of thinking about how we can, right, how are we transforming right now? If we think about the metamorphosis aspect of the card, what are we on a journey towards, right? If we think about the 8 of Wands going across the cards sort of quickly, rapidly, what is on the other side? What are we moving away from? And let's see what the cards have to say on that topic. All right. So I pulled the Sun again. I pulled this a couple episodes ago in a different deck. So this card says the Sun, good fortune, and this deck does not have a tarot deck guidebook with it, but it does have reflection questions on the back. So it says, what keeps you up at night? What is something you must accept? And who or what are you beginning to doubt? Again, that's what keeps you up at night. What is something you must accept? And who or what are you beginning to doubt? And again, this feels very much in vein with, right? What are we sort of allowing? What are we accepting? What are the things that, right, that make us anxious, or the things that we worry about that keeps us up at night? And then, right, what may be aspects of your life or things that are maybe moving really quickly? What are you beginning to doubt, right? Sometimes when things move really quickly and we feel sort of out of balance, or like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on. Sometimes, like, that's a scam, or that is something that's not going to serve you in the end, right? Sometimes that getting caught up in the moment, we can move beyond logic, and right, sometimes we can channel our intuition in that moment, but also sometimes, right, we just kind of get caught up in doing the next thing. Oh, this is the next step, that we might not even think about, like, do I actually want to take that step, right? This card also has the Eight of Wands, that's calling us to pause, review our options, rethink priorities. So maybe there's some things in your life that you're thinking, maybe I don't really need to be going to that group anymore, or maybe I want to do something differently, or maybe I want to hold these different boundaries, or show up differently, or have different expectations when I'm on vacation, just different things like that. All right, so links for the tarot decks will always be in the show notes and on my website if you'd like to look at them or purchase them. And thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just a reminder, the podcast comes out daily, Monday through Friday, for all of 2025. All right, see you soon. Bye-bye.